you. I will call this work session meeting of the San Marcos City Council to order. Today is June 6th of 2023. The time is 3 p.m. Ms. Trevino, let's see who's here.
Mr. Prather, Mr. Scott, Mr. Gleason.
Here.
Mayor Houston,
Here.
Ms. Garza, Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Mr. Mendoza.
Here.
We have a quorum present.
All right. First, we have our citizen comment time period, and I don't have my document about what I normally read, so I will just remind everyone that you need to sign up. The instructions are on the agenda, and don't say bad things about other people. All right. I believe we have Rosalie Ray is our first speaker.
Hello, Rosalie Ray, 201 Ridgewood in San Marcos. I'm just here mostly because nobody comes to you guys when you did something cool. And the transit agreement that you guys are talking about today is something cool. And I wanted to make sure that someone was here to say that this is a great partnership that you guys are working on. I know that I've only been here 2 years, and it's been at least 2 years, because I remember liking the tweet when I got the job that you guys were gonna do it, and now here we are almost doing it. And so I wanted to sort of commemorate that, and also to sort of say, in the imagining what the future will look like as this partnership. So I don't know if you guys are aware, but already you are the city council that is in charge of the transit agency with the 10th highest ridership per capita. We are equivalent to Portland, Oregon. This is largely the Bobcat shuttle, but that's pretty awesome. And so I think it's worth recognizing that the city has worked to add capacity, right? To have staff to actually think about transit, to be able to sit at the table with Texas State and sort of meaningfully engage with and understand what does a good route look like just for the city, not just for the university, and to sort of work through all of the history together to build something that's a great town and gown project. I did want to sort of note for things for the council to think about when the agreement comes is one, we sometimes talk about transit at the Parking Advisory Board, but it's not actually clear if there's anybody other than council that's supposed to talk about transit. And if you want that, if you want somebody to think about transit at least once a month, that's something to think about. Also sort of getting into the practice of regular service updates. We're a growing city. It should be something that's incredibly streamlined, that shows up on your sort of council agenda quarterly, like, oh, the Hayes County Local Health Board has moved, let's make sure there's a stop close by, that kind of thing. Making sure that there's that sort of very public piece, and that that public piece is happening somewhere where people can access it by transit. Maybe there needs to be a meeting earlier than 6 to talk about it, or the transit needs to run longer. And lastly, to think about moving both systems onto, I'm going to get wonky here, the General Transit Feed Specification, or GTFS. It used to be the Google Transit Feed. It's how your transit systems show up on Google Maps. Right now, we don't have that. So if you look for a bus stop in San Marcos, only Amtrak comes up. But now that you have the very cool real-time thing for the bus and for the shuttle separately, one piece of this integration that could come is that GTFS. And then everybody, tourists, students, city, et cetera, would be able to find it on the apps they already have. So I just want to thank you guys for doing this, and my time is up.
Thanks for the thanks. Because you're right, we don't get that often. All right. And our first presentation, Mr. Trevino.
Receive a staff update presentation on the transit partnership with Texas State University.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We're kicking off the work session today with an exciting update, as Rosalie just talked about, on transit partnership with Texas State. Today's presentation is being given by Pete Binion, Assistant Director of Public Works. I'm also pleased to welcome our Texas State partners to the meeting. With us today is John Root, Executive Director of Support Services, and Stephen Herrera, Director of Transportation. For many years, City Council has supported the effort to provide a coordinated, seamless transit system, and we're closer than ever to making this happen. Very, very, very proud moment. Since we began the partnership with the university, the city has received approximately $23 million in federal transit funds, and our partner, Texas State, has generated at least $11 million of that grant funding through its transit ridership. All of this funding will be spent here in San Marcos to improve mobility in our community. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Pete Binion to provide the presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Before we get into the slides, I just wanted to take a minute and talk about all of the planning studies that have come before in support of this effort. Even before the census in 2010, the Texas Transit Institute, who works on behalf of TxDOT, was already looking at coordinating the two transit systems in San Marcos. They did 2 studies. We've done 2 master plan studies that support it, and we did a coordinated transit plan study that looked at it intensively to identify the roles in the partnership and also to give us a model for the future. So this is a long time coming. Lots of people involved, both past and present, and so with that, we'll go ahead and start with the purpose. The purpose of today's presentation is to review the history of the partnership and the contribution of the parties. We're going to update Council on recent progress in negotiating the interlocal agreement and the funding agreement. We're going to update Council on current activities and proposed next steps. And then we'll have time for questions for staff and Texas State staff, should you wish. Next slide. So the history in San Marcos is of 2 separate transit systems. One transit system is the city's, called the bus. That's operated by the Capital Area Rural Transportation System. It has diverse pickup and drop-off locations around the community, over 100 stops. We have a route frequency of 30 or 60 minutes, and we have an annual ridership of approximately 75,000. The second transit system in San Marcos is the university service called the Bobcat Shuttle. This service is operated by TransDev. It has focused pickup and drop-off locations. It has a route frequency between 8 and 24 minutes, and it has 2 million annual riders on average. Next slide. Again, just reviewing our common interests in this particular project, the goal is to create a seamless transit system. Texas State is committed to improving our community and strengthening our partnership. We would like to provide the best transportation option to residents of San Marcos, which includes our university students. And we're also looking to maximize federal funding to advance our transit objectives. Next slide. So let's look at the benefits of this seamless transit system. First, it's inclusive of all residents. It is to remove barriers to transit service for every citizen. We are looking to make things simple. Coordinated marketing and also public outreach. Again, this will allow us to access more federal transit funding to enhance this system, and it also provides a bridge of good faith between the city and Texas State to bring the community together. Next slide. So what are the contributions to this transit partnership? For the city, we serve as the direct recipient of the Federal Transit Administration. So we are the ones that coordinate with the FTA, with the state through TxDOT, and also with our regional partners, the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. We implement grant compliance policies and procedures, and we maintain the fiduciary responsibility and grant management duties of these federal and state funds. Texas State University, as a voluntary reporter, essentially their role, what their role is to report their financial and operating data to the National Transit Database. They began doing that in 2017. By doing so, they have generated at least $10.8 million, if not more. And how that works is the Federal Transit Administration has a program called Small Transit Intensive City. So these are bonus funds that all cities are eligible for, but what has to occur is you have to be a small urbanized area, such as San Marcos, And then you have to meet or exceed the average performance of a large urbanized area such as San Antonio or Austin. With the university's report to the National Transit Database, San Marcos qualifies for those funds. So this is how it works. This is how this partnership, how both parties can leverage this partnership to provide more for San Marcos in public transit. Next slide, please. Council, you've seen this funding split detail table before. This table was in your presentation in November of 2022, but you'll note something a little bit different, and that's in the totals. This table is now complete. It has all 5 years of apportionment from the FTA. On your amount, your total amount, you'll see $23.5 million. Of those funds, we're proposing to share $11.7 million with the university for eligible projects, while we retain $11.8 million. Next slide. And here we get to the heart of this presentation, which is the progress that we've made recently in our agreements. Starting with the framework interlocal agreement, this document is substantially complete. This is the overarching document that memorializes the transit partnership for the seamless transit system. Its focus is on completing the transit master plan recommendations. It details the federal grant funds split table that we just looked at. It contains the funding agreement template as an exhibit, and I'll explain that a little more. But also, and this is very important to the university, this interlocal, it acknowledges future federal grant funds will be negotiated in good faith. So you may be wondering, you know, when we're talking about the transit master plan recommendations, what are those exactly? Well, I can give you 5. One is to expand service. We're looking to expand service for the community. We're looking to upgrade and improve pedestrian access and ADA access to bus stops. We'd like to upgrade our technology, including real-time bus arrival application for folks' mobile phones. We want to upgrade and right-size both transit fleets. And we want to eliminate onboard fare collection. And some of those objectives have already been met. Next slide. So the second document that we've been working on is a funding agreement template. This is a document that follows an FTA-funded project. So we have the interlocal agreement, and then underneath that interlocal agreement, we will have at least one, if not several, of these funding agreements. And they're tied to the grant award. They sit right over the top of the grant award. So what this does is it defines each party's responsibility. It contains the requirements for the subrecipient, the university. It also permits the city to share the funds with the university. It includes a project budget and project description. It'll be the exact same language, exact same budget that sits in the FTA's grant application that the city will put in. Based on our last discussion, we can also confirm that the university will match these federal funds with local funds. So what does this funding agreement template do? Well, it provides us flexibility for all types of projects. So you can use this template for an operating project. You can use it for a capital improvement project like buying buses. But you could also use it for a planning study. It allows you to do any of those eligible activities. And I may have mentioned, but I'll say it again, the project budget will detail what funds are to be used and how much of each fund. Also, the description will provide how the money will be spent and what benefit will be achieved by the project. Next slide. Okay, current activities. I've got to admit that this slide is now inaccurate. So this first bullet, FTA review of the funding agreement template is underway. That actually has not begun yet. And I can tell you why. On the 18th of this month, we were notified that potentially some of our FTA funds may be subject of rescission due to the debt ceiling, basically due to the negotiations at the federal level. Well, we're pleased to report that that's not the case currently. Okay, it's not the case. But when we took this funding agreement template to FTA, they requested a few weeks extra time because they're trying to move all those grants through to obligation. So So they're excited, they want to see it, we'll get it to them, but this is just a little bit inaccurate. It won't happen for maybe a month.
It's predictive.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. It was predictive.
I learned that from a former mayor.
I like it. So starting with bullet 2, these are all accurate. So the university is in the process of developing their project budget and also their description for the grant application. Staff is working with Human Resources to hire our transit compliance specialist for subrecipient oversight. And we are working with our consultants to develop a compliant oversight program for the subrecipient, which will be some reporting annually. Next slide. And so, council, related to the partnership, here are our next steps. We wish to return the interlocal agreement for your consideration either in July or in August. Pending your approval, we would then submit a grant application with the FTA for obligation on behalf of the university. That would occur in August or September. And then once that is obligated, we would then return the funding agreement with the project budget and description to council for your consideration in September or October. And then if we move the project through those steps, we move the agreements through those steps, we'll begin executing transit projects on behalf of the community. And as future year funding comes out, we will continue to assess and negotiate those future grant funds. And having said that, Mayor, I believe, if it's okay with you, I would turn it over to you for questions or comments.
Council? Questions? Mr. Mendoza?
First off, thank you so much. I'm extremely excited about this opening up for all of the city of San Marcos. On the, trying to go back on this, excuse me, for following up and auditing on this agreement, am I correct on that? That we're going to have somebody that,
We are.
sorry, yes, sir.
Yes,
So
sir.
somebody will go through and kind of just verify that it is efficient, that, and you said that's going to be yearly, or is that going to be?
Well, before we begin using the funding agreement, we're
Yes,
going to
sir.
have the Federal Transit Administration review it
Okay.
and comment on it if they feel they should. That'll be the first review. On the projects themselves, the funding, the grant applications, FTA will review all of those as we put them in for compliance.
Okay.
Once the project kicks off, it'll be the city's responsibility as the direct recipient to maintain compliance with FTA. And we will need to do that on behalf of our subrecipient, the university. So to do that correctly, we'll need to have some oversight of the university as the subrecipient. So we'll ask for some reports on a quarterly basis and on an annual basis.
And this will be the person for the transit compliance specialist?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Gleason?
Thanks, Mayor. I want to thank staff. I want to thank the representatives from the university. This is a huge step in the right direction between the cap and gown and this kind of rift, this, that the community has felt that between the university and the city. And I think it's going to be a real big step in the right direction that we needed it. This needed to be done a long time ago. I know this has been very complicated, and this has been an extremely difficult thing to do because of the money involved and the subrecipient and where the money's coming and going from. So staff, I know, has put a lot of time into this, and this is going to be a big deal for the community. It really is. And I'm looking forward to this being implemented, and I know this isn't going to be an easy process. This is going to be something that's going to take a lot of time for the university and the staff to review all this and keep up to date and make sure we don't lose any funding out of the deal. But I've talked to a lot of people who are very excited about this. And so thank you and kudos to the university for stepping up and for staff to working through this. And I'm looking forward to seeing this agreement and seeing where this goes over the next few years. So thank you all. I really do appreciate it. And I think the community is really going to be excited about it.
Just a comment, Mayor. I first got into council, this was one of the topics that we talked about, and I was hoping that I'd get to see it through. And thank God, I think I'll be able to see that this project go through. Thank you for working with the city, and I think we're going to be great partners, and I'm really excited for the next 10 or 15 years. Thank you.
I've got you all beat. We started talking about this in the 90s, and I think it was really before that. Yeah. And each time it was, oh, they, you just signed a new contract with the bus, and so I'm going, okay, well then in 3 years, we need to start, anyway. We're finally
Yes.
there, and that we've got things rolling. I want to thank the university staff involved with transportation. I want to thank our staff involved in transportation, all the folks over the last few years, because this is monumental, and it's going to be huge for our citizens and for the students both, to get from point A to point B that's not quite working the way we'd like it to at this point. So yeah, this is going to be huge. Thanks and kudos to everyone at the city, whether transportation or not. If you're working on this project, we thank you very, very much, because this is, it's wonderful to see such progress. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms.
And with that, we can go on to item 2.
Thank you.
Receive a staff presentation regarding approved FY23 CIP projects and related funding, including proposed issuance of debt, 2023 certificates of obligation issuance, and provide direction to staff.
Ms. Reyes.
Our next presentation is an overview of the projects to be funded from the fiscal year 2023 capital improvement projects list. The presentation identifies projects that will be debt funded, as well as those that have other funding or that will be deferred or canceled. So I know the mayor always asks us to say, what changed? And make sure we highlight that. And so Mr. Condor is going to do that. The debt funding is going to come from the sale of certificates of obligation, which is an item for your consideration on this evening's regular agenda. I'm now going to turn it over to our Director of Engineering and CIP, Sean Condor. And also we have in the audience Assistant Finance Director Ismael Garcia. So if there's anything in regard to the debt issuance or from a financial perspective, he's also here to chime in if needed. Thank you. Mr. Condor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Next slide. So as Ms. Reyes indicated, the purpose of this presentation is to brief City Council an update on the FY 2023 CIP project and discuss related funding, and also brief Council an update that issuance of the 2023 Certificate of Obligations. Next slide. As far as definitions go, what you're going to hear the term deferred, those are projects that basically been put off until a future date. Typically, it's associated with staff capacity.
Can you hold on just a second? The presentation starts on page 84 of your packet. Okay. Please continue. Sorry
All
for
right.
the interruption.
No problem. Most of those are deferred due to staff capacity or timing of other factors impacting a project, such as utility conflicts, right-of-way conflicts, or things like that. Other funding means projects that were either cash funded with some excess funds from the FY 2022 in excess of the 25% fund balance, as well as projects, water wastewater projects that were funded with impact fees. A project that has been canceled or reduced was either moved to the operating budget, perhaps it was completed with the existing funds in the project, or the project is just not ready to move forward, so we're going to cancel it and put it back in the CIP for future funding. Next slide. So this is a very high-level overview of the debt. Kind of rolls up all of them together. So in the FY 2023 CIP, we approved $48.9 million. There was a little over $12 million that was deferred in previous years. So that means we have about $61 million that we need to issue potentially debt in this year or in the future. So what we do from that is we take out what's not ready. We take the deferred projects, which is about $15.8 million. We subtract that out. We subtract out the projects that are being funded with cash. Then we subtract out the projects being funded with impact fees. And then we subtract out the projects being funded that are canceled or reduced, which gives us a total of $32 million that will be part of the debt issuance this afternoon. So on the right there, you see we have it broken up by fund. And for the general fund, we have about 13.5. Electric is a little under 13 million. Water is 2.6 million. Wastewater is 3.5. And notice on storm I have 0. And I'm going to cover this later on in the presentation, but we're using general funds to help fund that. And so that's how you get to the 13.7 million. Next slide. So this is going to look the same pretty much for each funds over the next several. And so I'm going to start with the general fund. And so in the CIP, we had 18.6 million approved for general fund, and then we had a 1.48 million prior year deferred. And then you'll see there that stormwater debt I was talking about. We're transferring over 2.35 million that's going to be paid for under the general fund that were stormwater projects, stormwater debt. So So that gives us about 22.4 million that needs to be funded. Of that, we're deferring 7 million. We're using cash on a little over 1 million. And then we've canceled or reduced about 870,000, which gives us 13.5 million general fund to be debt funded. Next slide. So I'm going to take a minute on this slide because you're going to see this on a lot of projects. I'm not going to read every single thing on this slide, but you'll see, starting on the left, we have the project number and the project description, which is pretty self-explanatory. Then you have prior year deferred. So this is the amount that was deferred from either the FY 2018, 19, 20, or whatever before 23 CIP. The next column was what is approved in the 23 CIP. And I got these two bold lines. This represents what's actually being part of the debt sale. And then to the right of that is kind of the what changed, if you will. You got the other funding, which is either cash funded or impact fee funded. The next column is deferred. Those are projects that just aren't ready. Those will not be funded this year. And then we've got canceled, which I put in red, showing the projects that were either reduced or canceled. So on this slide, we're going to be funding the airport project. We're going to hold off on that until we get something from the DOL, so we don't know exactly how much we need. So we're going to hold off till we get that amount. We will be funding the airport runway extension, the airport taxiway, the Cape Stam. We're doing there is we're only going to fund enough to get the design moving so we know what the construction costs are. We'll come back in the future and fund that once we know what the full cost is going to be on that project. So city facilities, Dunbar, and fiber optics, we're going to go ahead and use cash on those. Next slide. And so this is just a continuation. And so all the fire items are being funded, the fire department, training facility, the West Nest system, the Fire Station 3 remodel, and the Fire Station 1. Those will be funded now. The 5 Mile Dam will be funded now. The historic preservation will be funded. The household hazardous waste, we're looking at that site to see what we need to do with the project as a whole. So we want to move forward with the building until we know what that whole site will do. So we're doing the site analysis now, and we'll fund that in future years for construction. And then Ranch Road 12, we're moving forward with the design money on that as well. Next slide. So next we have the Plaza City Parks will be funded now. The public safety's mobile video technology, we don't need those funds. The project had enough to cover the needs for it. The Quail Creek development plan is moving forward. It's being cash funded. The river ADA restoration and sidewalk bus stops, we're going to defer those. The small area comp plans will move forward with funding now. The strategic land acquisition will be deferred, and transportation oversize will be funded now with cash. Next slide. So now we get into stormwater, and so again, it's a little bit different because of how we're funding stormwater this year, but you'll see a little over 2 million was approved in the CIP, 1.85, a little over 1.8 was deferred, so it gives us 3.8 million. Of that, we deferred 1.3 million. We're using cash, a little under 200,000, and you'll see that asterisk. We use general funds cash for that, not stormwater funds. And then we're going to transfer the remaining debt, which is 2.35, over to the general fund. That's why you saw that little asterisk on the other slide. So in terms of the stormwater, there'll be nothing funded now. Next slide. So this is a nice short slide here. We only got a few projects. The Castle Forest, that one is being deferred. That got some water development board money, so we're deferring it while we check those boxes that's required by the funding to get. So that'll come online next year, hopefully. The cemetery, the River Ridge, stormwater, the Wallace addition, those are all moving forward now. And then the Ranch Road 12 and stormwater systems, those will be funded with cash. Next slide. Then we get into the electric utility. A little over 12 million was approved in the CIP, 1.7 was deferred, gives us about 13.9 million. The 2023 projects, we deferred a little over 360. We're using cash on 455,000, and we've canceled 100,000 for a total of 12.95 million. Next slide. So of those, we've got the 702 Belvin, we're using cash on that. The Blanco Gardens Underground will be funded now. We're deferring the Cheatham water line, and we've canceled the facility security. Those projects had enough funding, we didn't need that money. And the Hopkins GIS substation, Hutchinson underground conversion are moving forward as part of the debt sale. Next slide. So as far as the next slide on electric, we got the K1 Charter Academy, which is being funded now. The Linda Drive improvements will be funded now. The main lift station, we deferred that while we wait on the wastewater master plan. The Medical Parkway rebuild, PCR building at Pat Garrison, Redwood 320 reconductor, and RW 240 rebuild. Those are all moving forward now as debt. Next slide. The SM230 reconductor and the small area comp plan will be cash funded. The strategic land acquisition will be deferred. The Sunset Acres subdivision electric will be funded now. The underground conversion will be cash funded, and then Wallace Addition and Zone Pole 3 will be debt funded. Next slide. So now we get into water. Again, same story, rinse and repeat, right? We had $7.6 million approved in the CIP. We deferred $4.3 million for just under $12 million being needed. For the 2023 debt, so we are deferring $2.7 million. We're using cash on $250,000. We have a little over $5.4 million on impact fee, and then we canceled just under $1 million for $2.625. Next slide. So breaking those projects down, we got the Airport FM110 connection drive has been deferred. The Blanco Vista elevated storage tank will be impact fee. The Briarwood water line will be debt funded. The Castle Forest, Centerpoint water line, and Cheatham water line are all being deferred. The Comanche pump stations will be impact fee. The Dunbar utilities will be deferred, and the facility security was canceled. Next slide. Right, I lost my place here. Boy, I think I'm gonna have to get glasses, Lori. Let's see. It's that facility security. It's listed twice. That's what's throwing me off. It's what it is. It was funded in different years, and so we list it twice when it's funded in a different year. So that one has been canceled. The Highway 80 utilities will be funded with impact fees. Linda Drive, Midway will be funded, debt funded. Old Rancho 12, Rattler Road, small area comp plan will be cash funded, and then the strategic land acquisition will be deferred. Next slide. The Trails End water extension, that's one that we're gonna go ahead and cancel and put back in the CIP for a future late. That's for out there at Kissing Tree area. Project's not quite ready, or it's really developer driven, so we need some more, they need to move along before we can put that back in there. So it'll come back in next year's CIP or future year CIPs. The Trunk Hill water tank, again, that'll be deferred, waiting on development to catch up. The undersized water mains, we're gonna put that back in the CIP, so we canceled it. We'll come back later and put that in there. The university wastewater replacement, we're gonna fund that now. And then the water improvements and water main oversize will be funded now with cash. And then the pump stations and water systems, we actually moved that over to operating budget, so we're canceling that, and that'll fall off the CIP in future years. Next slide. Wastewater. So we had a little, 8.3 million was approved. We deferred 3.1 million, total of 11.5 million. Of this year's CIP, we deferred 4.3 million. We're gonna cash fund 280,000, use 3 million in impact fees, and canceled about 300,000 for 3.5 million. Next slide. And so the first project on there is the Castle Forest. Again, that's been deferred. The Davis Lane lift station, we're deferring that while the design catches up. The Dunbar utilities has been deferred. The fiber optic and Highway 80 will be funded with impact fees and cash. The Linda Drive project will be funded now, and the main lift station, again, will be deferred while we wait on the wastewater master plan. Next slide. The Midway utility improvements will be funded now. The Millview project will be deferred. Old Rancho 12 will be cash funded. Strategic land acquisition will be deferred. The wastewater collection improvements has been rolled to operating, so that's been canceled. Wastewater improvements will be funded now. Wastewater lift station, again deferred, it's been rolled to operating budget. And then the wastewater master plan update will be funded now. The Castle Forest and Davis Lane and Dunbar have all been deferred. Oh, sorry, did I say next slide? Yeah. And let's see. Oh, there we go. And so this is the timeline. I'm going to apologize. I believe this one didn't get updated in the PowerPoint, so we can send that to you. It's shifted about a month. So This is one that, it should be June, not May 17th, so you're getting that presentation now. This evening, you're gonna get the certificate, the intent to issue is coming this evening. And then we're gonna do the first notice and second notice, after that, weeks 1 and 2. And then this summer, they'll do the other items. So what I can do is I can email all this updated slide here showing the dates. And I don't know, is that in the presentation this afternoon?
This has been updated, Sean.
It has, Hayden's on top of it.
Always is.
Yes, he is. He saved me here, so. All right. So this is the correct slide, and I'm gonna have to turn around to read it here. So June 12th, they'll do the first notice of intent. June 19th, they'll do the second notice, and then June 10th, they'll do the rating agency conference call. June 21st will be the ratings received and published by SPF. And then come in August, we'll bring it back for city council consideration, with August 16th being sent to underwriting. Then August 23rd, we'll get the funds and actually be able to fund these projects. So with that, I'll open it up for questions, and I can handle the CIP stuff, but Ishmael's gonna help me out on the finance stuff. So.
All right. Mr. Gleason?
Thanks, I appreciate the presentation and kind of breaking down the CIP book. It helps out a lot. Just taking the whole booklet and when you guys kind of break it down on a PowerPoint, it does help. The one project, number 680 Castle Forest, could you explain the reasons for the deferment on that again?
Sure. So when we applied for Texas Water Development Board and we got approved, they made us go back and redo some of the PER requirements to check the boxes, if you will, to get that funding. So we had to kind of go back and redo that. It didn't delay us too much. I think it should move forward next year, though, for construction.
Okay, so we're expecting that as just an additional deferment, but that's additional funds we were going to see that wouldn't come directly out of our general funds anyway,
Yeah,
the enterprise funds.
I think we got $500,000 in grant
Okay.
and maybe 800 loan forgiveness, something like
Okay.
that.
And then on 802 on the Quail Creek Development Plan, what kind of timeline were we looking at on that?
Well, I would be guessing on that. Jamie Case, Parks Director, will be taking the lead on that, and I'm not sure if she's on the call.
I know that as soon as this funding is in place, we'll go ahead. I believe what we're going to do is change order the scope into the Riverfront Parks Master Plan so that we can coordinate what functions might move to that location. So I think we'll get going on that as soon as these funds get in place. And I would say that we're probably looking about 8 months to a year. There she is. She can answer.
Sorry, I
Much
had
better.
it tied into my double screens and then it wouldn't let me talk to you guys. Sorry about that. So as Lori was saying, we will get started probably, I guess, by the fall. And so it could take 6 to 10 months, just depending, but we should have it wrapped up by 10 months, no later than that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Case. I just really kind of wanted to give the public a little bit of what kind of timeline are we looking at, a year to 2 years to study this? And I know there's going to be a lot to look at here, but I just kind of wanted to put it out there for the public.
And that we haven't forgotten about it.
And we haven't forgot about it. I think about it a lot.
Yeah.
So, I think that's the only two that I had for now. So
All right.
really appreciate staff and that's time on all this.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gleason, what was that last number that you were asking about?
The Quail Creek,
Oh, quick, thank you.
802.
Yep. And of course, the numbers that you see here correspond to the project numbers in the book, which is really helpful. I mean, clearly we need to do that, but it's very helpful. Did you have any
I
questions?
did, yes, ma'am. Thank
Go
you,
ahead,
Mayor.
Mr. Mendoza.
I wanted to ask, really just why they were deferred. The first ones were the ADA, basically the ADA issues that we have with the restrooms and the bus stops. Why are we deferring that till next year?
So most of those were waiting on the Parks Master Plan
Oh, okay.
to dictate those, but those are tagged parks projects, so I'm going to assume that's what it was. If we can get a clear answer from Ms. Case, if she's still on, if you like.
Is Casey, you still there by chance? Oh, hey.
There she is.
Sorry, I'm having to juggle. Yeah, so we are, whenever we purchased the Quail Creek property, we were currently going and kind of wrapping up our riverfront park design plan. So because these are, some of the amenities could potentially be recommended to be relocated out of the river parks. We wanted to have a place to show the public where they could potentially go, being the Quail Creek property. So we kind of put a pin in completing that Riverfront Parks plan. So they will be running kind of parallel with each other, the Quail Creek and the Riverfront Parks. So they'll be wrapping up at the same time. So once we get those plans formally adopted, then we will move forward with doing the formal restroom improvements. We're doing some immediate needs, just kind of, replacing some toilets and those kinds of things, but not doing a full rehab or new construction on any restrooms until we complete that plan.
Thank you very much, and thank you for also taking on this issue. It's so important that we get up to standards here. And I did have one other question, and this was actually for 657 for the Cheatham water line, the Guadalupe to CM Allen. Why is that being deferred also, just out of curiosity?
That one's more staff capacity.
Okay.
It's really a low priority project compared to others on the list, and we're actually going to sit down this summer with the water department and see how important that project is, because there's an 8-inch there. That's upsized it to 12. Is it really going to?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we want to kind of focus on the other ones for now.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Got my question answered.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right. And this is wonderful, the information, this is great. My only well, I'm not going to say that because I might have another one, but my concern is I see a lot of things are being deferred. So does that mean next year we're going to get a whopping large list? Because I know every year some things get pushed in the future for various and sundry good reasons. But are we going to have a really big list next year?
We should be. We're accounting for those deferments in the models, so we do not just assume they've been all funded.
Right.
So they do account for that in the rate models. And so the big one is the household hazardous waste at $5 million. And so that's actually being paid for out of the household hazardous waste, the garbage fee. So that won't impact the general fund. And hopefully, the ideal obviously is not to defer. We don't want to put them in the CIP unless they're ready, but you got to remember at the same time, this list about 16 to 18 months ago is when we did it. So
Right.
a lot's changed between now and then, but ideally, we are looking at those deferred projects when we present this to you and accounting for that when we talk about these rates. So.
I got one more thing, Mayor.
Okay, and that's all I had. Go ahead.
My only question too, this is kind of more of a general relation to the interest rates. How much do the increase in interest rates go into your thought process for deferment? I mean, is that, that we're looking at a substantial increase in what we're going to have to pay out for the bonds for this year comparatively what it been in 12 months from previously. I mean, is that going into the thought here at all that we're maybe deferring some things because potentially we could see rates come down? I didn't know how much that even plays a part in what year. Is it more capacity and things like that than actually trying to gamble on what the rates might be?
Yeah, I'm going to say we don't put a whole lot of gamble in the rates.
Yeah.
The biggest thing we do is we don't want to sell debt unless we're going to spend the money. We don't want to sit there and send $5 million to sit there for 12 to 6 months and do nothing. And we'll come back next year and fund it and save that interest for other projects.
Okay. I just get asked about it a lot. Anytime there's a certificate of obligation or when we sell bonds, people from the beginning always ask, well, what do these rates, the changes in rates mean for us as a taxpayer? And it can get extremely complicated. And that's kind of what I tell everybody is that I don't think we're really worrying about that too much. It says if we have the capacity, the projects are in place, that they've been studied and
Correct.
engineered, that we're going to do them. So I just wanted to help clarify
And-
with that too.
For the most part, interest rates have been pretty stable, and we try to look at it on the other side in terms of our investments and how we can try to maximize, returns on things that we do. But the other part of it is that, as we talked with council during your visioning session in January, we're really having to rethink how we do the CIP. And a lot of times, it's just the way that there's been so many projects that have come up, and it's, staff capacity, the complexity of things, but also just trying to be a good fiduciary of resources and making sure that we're looking at how, we're phasing things in across the community. And so if things aren't necessarily going to be constructed, in a timely fashion within that fiscal year. We're not selling it just because, oh, it's on the CIP. We're trying to make sure that it's something that can really get done so that we're not going out and taking that capacity that may be needed for some other things and trying to not max ourselves out on some of that. So just a different philosophy, different approach, and really trying to make sure we have more consistency and stability in how we approach the CIP.
Mayor, I actually have one more question, if you don't mind.
So do I, but you can go
Oh,
first.
sorry, thank you. This is actually in regards to the 833, the 5 Mile Dam, the lighting. I was on, oh gosh, I was on Planning and Zoning when we actually approved this on the CIP, and I understand that it was being matched by the county. How does that work when it goes to debt sell if we're matching this with how does that relationship work?
Sure. Let me see if that is cash funded or not. Okay, Jamie's
That
on?
was my question, because remember, we didn't do it with ARP dollars, and then we were reconsidering, but then other funding had been found or something. That was my question.
Oh.
Ms. Case?
Yes, so the county has approved to joint fund $400,000. It is the remaining, the county and the city joint funded the development of this complex back in the early 2000s, so between 2005. Last phase was completed in, I believe, 2009. So this is just the next phase of improvements in coordination with our partnership with the county. So it's the remaining POSAC funds for that bond year. I believe that was in 2005. So it's just the remaining funds. And so our portion is $400,000 to get this completed.
And so the 400,000 is our share, and where is it being funded?
Debt funded.
Debt
General
funded.
fund?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. What was it that happened when it was on was it ARP? I think it was an ARPA list?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. We did request ARP funds for it initially. And then obviously other priorities did take precedence. And so we did request CIP funding in order to make that match.
Okay. I was thinking y'all had found another source of funds, and that's why it came off the ARP list, but I could be remembering that wrong.
I think
Okay.
you might be thinking of maybe the city park improvements, perhaps, Mayor?
No, it was the soccer lights, because I knew some people that were not happy when it came off the list. So, no, it was definitely the 400,000 for the lighting.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But anyway,
And I think
we're going to get there.
what I'm recalling on that is that we brought it forward as ARP money being one of the recommended funding sources that could be considered. And council said, not now, maybe that's something with the second. And so we ended up putting it into the CIP instead of ARP.
Okay,
In this case,
we're going to get there. That's good.
Yes, ma'am.
in the county's portion of that was coming from POSAC, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is my understanding. It's the remaining balance of those bond funds. I believe it's from a 2005 general obligation bond issuance.
Okay.
All righty then. And that was my question. So my second question, or third or fourth. Any other questions? If not, this is wonderful to have this level of detail, because citizens kind of expect us to know what's going on, and now I feel like I know a whole lot more about what's going on, what's getting deferred, and why, et cetera. So this is great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Condor.
Thanks to all who made this spreadsheet and presentation happen. All right. Ms. Trevino, are we to question and answer with press and public? Then we are at question and answer with press and public. Is there anyone in chambers wishing to ask a question? Is there anyone online that signed up?
No, ma'am.
All right. There's no executive session?
No, ma'am.
I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion from Mr. Mendoza, seconded by Ms. Gleason. Mr. Trevino.
All right, Mr. Prather, Mr. Scott, Mr. Gleason.
Aye.
Mayor Houston,
Aye.
Ms. Garza, Mr. Gonzalez, and Mr. Mendoza.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes 4-0 with 3 absent.
All righty. Then we will conclude our meeting at 3:49.